Okay, now we're going to talk about basic math for what I'm calling formula hats, where there isn't a pattern per se. You're just creating the hat using a pattern stitch like this one. We'll use this as an example. Okay, this one, here's our seam. What we did was, this is a 9 stitch, I was experimenting, 9 stitch pattern repeat. So on stitch 1, we did, this is the row, here's our first setup row, second setup row with back stitch, back loop only, single crochet. So here's our first pattern row. First stitch was a double crochet, followed by 8 single crochets in the back loop only. Then we started the second row, and that one started with single crochets, 8 of them, and then a double crochet in the 9th stitch. And the basic formula for this hat pattern is to skip 1 stitch over with each row. So this is our main color. What the band is the main color. So it just keeps going 1 stitch to the left, and the contrast color continues that pattern and goes 1 stitch to the left all the way up. Okay? Okay, that's the basic math. And in order, the other math that you have to consider then is when you're making your band, whether it's a back loop only single crochet ribbing, or a Tunisian band, or just doing one that starts out with the 2 rounds of chain and then 2 rounds of back loop single crochet. Whatever you're doing, you have to decide ahead how many stitches are in your pattern repeat. This one's 9, and how big you want your hat. So you have to make your band in a multiple of that number of stitches. This is 72 stitches. So it's a multiple of 9. 9 times 8 is 72. So around the hat, there are 8 pattern or repeats of the pattern. And there are 9 stitches at the beginning of the pattern repeats. Okay, this one, I think I did this one. Oh, I know. It was this one. Where did it go? Ah, here. This one, I'm basically using kind of scrap yarn from another hat, so I didn't want this one to be too big. I needed a small to donate anyway. And so this one is an 11 stitch pattern repeat, just experimenting, and it's 66 stitches in the band. So there are 6 repeats of the pattern. And this one, just experimenting again, started with 2 double crochets in that first round, and then you skip over 2 in the next round. This is the main color, and the next round is the contrast color, this yarn, and it does 2 double crochets followed by 9 single crochets all the way around. So this one is 2 followed by 9, and you're going to continue that all the way up until you get to the point where you're going to start doing your decreases, which are always going to be in the center between the two sets of double crochets, as far away from the sets of double crochets for both of the rounds. So if this was our decrease round, we would do our invisible single crochet decrease somewhere here in the middle. Well, actually, this next round would be using these two, so we would want to do them in these, because we're always moving to the left, so we want to give some room for the next two, because that's following our formula. Okay, so that's the basic math. You figure out how big you want to make your hat. You know, if you're measuring, you could, do it, according to a measurement, and to make sure that the band's going to be big enough. Then if the band is big enough, the hat will be, because it doesn't pull in unless you're a very tight crocheter. It's going to stay flexible. And I'm using only a 4.5 millimeter hook. If you're a real tight crocheter, you'd probably have to go up to a 5. I'm making these for winter in Michigan, and so I don't want them too light and airy. Ones that I make in the summer, I go up to, even with some yarns, even a 5.5. But this is winter, and we want it warm. So all you have to do is decide how big you want it, using measurements if you need to. Make it that length, and then decide on your pattern repeat whether you're going to do something like this one, or this was another formula hat. This one, the formula is, I think this one was, this one is based on 10 stitches in a pattern repeat. And so there's 10 stitches between here and here. And we started out, let's find the seam. And there's the seam right there. We started out with a double crochet in the first stitch, and we moved across with single crochets in the back loop for the next 9. And then we did another double crochet. Some people think it helps to, on this very first round, you either need to count or you need to count ahead and indicate when, on this row here, when you're going to be making your double crochets, because they do have to be spaced evenly for the pattern to, or the formula to work. Okay, then the rule for this formula is you simply go 1 over with every main color round. 1 over to the right. The contrast color does just the opposite. It started out here, this is the round, the first round, and it started out with 9 single crochets and then this double crochet in the 10th stitch. And with each one, each successive round of contrast color, it is veering 1 off to the right, making this neat pattern. And you'll notice that here the contrast color was placed, and you can't do the double crochet for the main color where there's already a double crochet, so we moved 1 over. That's the rule for this formula. If there's already a double crochet, you just continue the pattern, and visually it works. It is 1 off, but it works, and it makes quite a nice pattern. And here's the result at the top after it's all finished. Okay, so that's the basic math. Decide your size of your hat, how many stitches per pattern repeat, and then make your hat in that in a multiple of that number of stitches. And I've got this one that's 11, this one that's 10. I've done this one is, no, this one is 9, excuse me. This one's 11, 9, and 10. I've done pattern stitches with 8, and so the sky's the limit. Try 12 or 13 if you want to be adventuresome. Okay. Oh, the other thing about the math to consider is if you do a pattern, a stitch pattern that's very short, like there are, say, 6 or 8 stitches. Let's say you're making a 8-stitch pattern repeat, and you have made it 80 stitches wide because you want to make a big hat. That means that your ratio between them, it's the only word I can think to say, is a bit off. If your number of stitches in the repeat is less than the number of repeats around. If you do 8 and 8, they're equal, it'll probably work out just fine. That would be, a small hat, 64. But 8 stitch pattern repeat and 10 is possibly going to lead to a problem when you get to the top of the hat and you're doing your decreases, because you will be decreasing very rapidly, and you will really quickly get to the point where all you have left are your double crochets, which could be a problem. It won't work with the formula. You have to basically do some of the things that I've done in the pattern hats, but I'm trying to show you how to do a formula hat. So if you were doing that, it would be much better to do a 10-stitch pattern repeat, say on an 80-stitch hat, 10-stitch pattern repeat, and 8 repeats of the pattern. Or the other thing you could do is when you get to the top of the hat and you start doing your decreases, only decrease, pick one color, it doesn't matter. That's the other thing about these formula hats, is you keep working until you've got basically the height you need, because anytime after it goes in, this is the height of your hat right there. Okay? So, but if you're doing, say, an 80-stitch hat and an 8-stitch repeat, you've got 10 repeats of the pattern, much better to, let's say you're starting with the main color, do your decrease on the main color, but not on the contrast color, or vice versa. Does not matter, but just decrease every other round until you get to a point where it's more feasible, maybe in the last 4 rows or something, where it's more feasible to start doing it every single round. Okay? That's what this one's looking like. So that's the math.